We are now streaming. This is a work session on the 2025 proposed general government operating budget utility enterprise ACDA and its work session. The assembly today is October 25, 2024. We actually convened close to 12:10, but we took a break for logistical purposes. We're back on the record now. We'll start with introductions. Mr. Perez-Verdillo.
Cameron Perez-Verdillo.
Mark Littlefield.
Karen Braga.
Scott Meyer.
Daniel Boland.
Zach Johnson.
Christopher Constant on the phone. Ms. Zalatow.
Yes.
Oh, we hear you. Mr. Martinez.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Brawley.
Here. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Browse, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to everybody for continuing to be here today. It's going to be more fun. Stepping into phase 2 of our general government operating capital and utility and enterprise budget. We are going to start with internal audit because the director of internal audit is available right now. We will be moving some of these sort of scheduled timings around within the work session in order to accommodate other people's schedules and how they have been available for today. But we can start with internal audit and then we will move through the other general government entities. Then we will move into, I believe, a presentation about the fleet levies and then transition into general government or into the utilities and enterprises operating in capital. The fleet levy detail is a slide deck that will be coming towards you shortly. So that will be a different presentation material than this current slide deck, but we can roll through. Let's see. As we discussed last time, the mayor's priorities for the general government budget and the utility and operating budget at large are the pillars of good government, safe streets and trails, and building our future. Ms. Skovic touched on these during the homelessness work session, but to review, the 2025 budget goals are to address homelessness head-on, expand and align Anchorage's crisis response services, improve and invest in snow removal, invest in traffic calming and safe public spaces, to support childcare and early education, and to get the basics right, continuing MOA constituent work, and improving recruitment and retention to ensure day-to-day services that the municipality provides to the community. The top lines from the budget changes are the 2024 revised budget total of $620 million was rolled into a continuation budget of $634 million. Almost 12 million of that change is the labor continuation based on the contractual changes from 24 to 25. And the 2025 proposed budget total is $645.8 million. These are the same numbers that we presented at the previous work session and include the highlight items of the sort of larger changes within the budget numbers. Any questions on those?
Nope, thank you. No, Mr. Rivera joined us on the phone.
Okay, then we will move on to the internal audit operating budget. Scott, you want to come up here? So Scott Kim is our acting director of internal audit, and the 2024 revised budget changes the 2025 proposed budget changes include $10,000 in salaries and benefits adjustments, but no other changes aside from that. And that is internal audit's budget changes. Are there any questions?
So that's a 1%, roughly 1.2% increase, an adjustment. Is that consistent with what our efforts have been for pension and recruitment?
To the chair, I would have to drill down into this $10,000 to determine where the growth actually came from. There's only 6 employees, 1 part-time employee within the department. So I think it's part of the non-rep increase that is programmed for next year, which is 1.5 as part of the mayor's proposed budget and 2.5 as part of the step increases that the assembly approved much earlier this year as part of the non-rep salary schedules change. So, but we can determine if that is exactly where that number comes from and answer the question. But to answer the specific question you asked, yes, that is in line with the other numbers for recruitment and retention that are being used throughout the municipality.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, anyone? Anyone on the phone?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Raleigh? Oh, Ms. Zalato, I'm sorry.
It's Meg. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. So are we going to have the kind of capacity we want in internal audit with a continuation budget? I think we always run up on capacity issues for audits. And it feels like as we are working to get a clear picture of the past couple of years, we may need additional capacity. Is there room to have that conversation in 1Q after we put forward what we're hoping for audits? Or how do we want to balance that?
Through the chair to member Zalatel, I believe that the conversations about the workload and work plan for internal audit going into the next year and continuing over the next few years is part of the conversation that we are working through with Scott and the incoming director, Mr. Thurn, to figure out exactly what the municipality and the assembly are interested in seeing as part of that audit process. Not only are there many internal municipal operations that we would like to see audited, but I think there are a couple other, special subject matters that we would like to add to the list. Additional capacity could definitely be part of the conversation at 1Q based on revenue availability, but we will be continuing the conversation about internal audits work throughout 25 over the next few months. And Mr. Kim can answer if there are any specific capacity needs that he wants to speak to, because there probably are.
Good. All right. Any further questions? Mr. Presberdia? Okay, so he'll probably pop back on. He put himself in the queue. There he is. Mr. Presberdia, you have a question?
Thank you. Sorry, I dropped off for a second. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the same line of questioning from the Zalatel. I understand that one of the priorities the mayor has this year is good government, and I guess one of the things I'm curious about is, do you see audit as one of the prime ways to determine where we can improve the government? Is that something that you see as a priority over the next year or two?
Through the chair to member Presverdia, I think the current situation with the municipality is that there is the traditional job duties of internal audit. There are work plans that have been standardized over years, the way that the schedule works, and they roll through their various topics. There are other larger audits that probably should be performed that would need to be done in consult with internal audit and potentially outside third-party contractors. And that is part of the conversation that we need to continue to have in order to make sure that we are covering the list as we would want to see those funds expended over time. I think that that would require additional appropriations for contractual work, but would all be brought forward as a plan proposal in continuing conversations.
Thank you. That's very helpful to understand that's your sort of strategy is beyond this particular office, but looking at other ways to determine the needs of the internal functioning. Is that right? So you're looking at both using internal audit, but also contracting out some of this work.
Through the chair to member Presverdia, yes. There are
Okay.
the traditional audit functions, accounting audits like BDO, and we use them for the Act for purpose and other financial audits. There are other entities that can look specifically into government spending in the way that has been exercised over the last few years. I think that there are additional processes that will be undertaken, including, full revisions of the policy and procedure documents that the municipality uses. I think we discussed that during maybe the first work session, that the outdated P&Ps allow for some real challenges within the departments and how they operate on a day-to-day basis, because some of those documents have not been updated since the 80s. And all of that is part of the good government improvements and bringing the municipality forward into the next phase of operations. We need to, for lack of a better phrase, grow up a little bit with the way that we do our work.
Great. Thank you very much.
Others? Anyone? All right. I think that pretty much covers it. The audit it's an interesting function. It lives really in the assembly branch under the charter. It's staffed out of the executive branch. It's an area of consideration that we'll probably be looking at over the next year, or maybe even sooner, in relationship to previous litigation that kind of challenged these departments that serve between branches. And we're going to need to figure out a way to ensure that what we're doing is within the doctrine of separation of powers and meets both branches' needs. And so that's going to be a theme, kind of a subtextual theme of this early year, the next several months, as we try to figure that out. And so just so folks are aware, there is some legal analysis happening right now on how to square that function to make sure it continues to exist in that place where it's always been and can withstand any challenge. So just kind of a broad strokes conversation about audit. So, all right, thank you very much. And I don't know, Kim will be here soon. He'll be in 5 minutes. There is a giant thing of banana pudding in the back room and food. Everybody get in there and eat. There's so much food. Ordered too much. I know. We'll be back in 5 minutes. I'll do introductions again real brief. So this is the continuing work session for the budget, 2025 proposed budget, general government operating. Today's October 25th. This is continuation of the meeting we started an hour ago. We'll do introductions in the room. Mr. Littlefield.
Mark Littlefield. Scott
Ms.
Myers.
Bronga's off in the corner. Mr. Myers.
Daniel Voland.
Zach Johnson.
Christopher Constant on the phone. Oh, Ms. Bronga appears to be on the phone. Ms. Bronga.
Yep.
All right, Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Thank you, Ms. Brawley.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Presverdia. Are you there, Mr. Presverdia? Okay, Ms. Zalatel.
Here.
All right, so we'll go ahead and dive in. Ms. Brose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back into the departmental budget changes. We will continue the conversation with the operating budget of equity and justice. And we have with us the Chief Equity Officer, Kim Waller. She can speak to some of the more specific questions that members may have about the department and operations going into 25. But the changes on the operating budget side include 79,000 in salaries and benefits adjustments and a decrement of one position that is being moved from the office into the Chief Administrative Officer to take the Office of Equal Opportunity and turn it into the Federal Compliance Office. It is not a loss of a staff person, it's a transfer. So are there specific questions on the budget items?
I don't yet see any questions. Now is the first round of conversations for the Office of Equity and Justice.
Yes, any questions for Officer Waller?
Nobody. I need to get to that page. Okay, so Kim, this is your budget for next year. Does it reflect what you think you're going to need?
Thank you, Member Constant. The budget for next year is, as I am currently continuing to learn about what is needed in this office, I will say that I do predict an increase in budgetary needs for next year, and that is primarily because, as Ms. Browse mentioned, with the Office of the EOE going away and Erica's position being contracted, there are additional duties that are falling under the purview of this office that are going to take a pretty fair amount of attention, primarily among them being ensuring that we are in compliance with language access and doing that right. And also assuring that our affirmative action plan is actually implemented throughout the municipality. In addition to that, I am anticipating some travel to other cities to better understand what their systems are around equity and how they work in different cities, and learning from other cities as well. So I am predicting a slight increase in the budget, but right now, as it is static, it is fine.
Get us through the first quarter.
Right.
So second question, and then I'll hand it over to Ms. Zalatil, who's in the queue. Status of the training program, the training program relating to the native village of Eklutna.
Relating to, I didn't hear
The
you.
native village of Eklutna. So in the original charter of the position, there's a training that the Office of Equity and Justice is supposed to develop. And for 3 years, it was supposed to be developed and in development. And after 3 years, it was never developed. And so if you haven't seen that requirement, it's definitely one to tune into because it needs to be figured out. And so a status check on where all that work went and if there was actually any real work done, some outreach to the native village to connect with their team and understand what was done from their perspective might also be pretty valuable for you.
Thank you. And I have reached out to Mr. Leggett to learn more about that. I know that we spoke a little bit about that in our time together, but I will continue to get some answers for you there.
Thanks. Yeah, training program for all municipal employees relating to the history of this land. Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Ms. Weller. Kind of following up on Mr. Constant's question, we haven't seen a ton of tangible product out of the Office of Equity and Justice since it's been created. And so I would like to know, in realistic terms, based on what you shared about some of the changing duties, what can we expect for the budgeted amount? Or are we able to expect to see a work plan coming forward that kind of details what you can do with what you have? And then if we were able to find additional funding, particularly at first quarter, what additional things you could do?
Thank you, Chair Zolotel. I can't speak to what did or did not come out of this office prior to my arrival. I will say that since I have been in the seat in about 7 weeks, we have developed a very robust plan for a 6 to 12 month action plan, which I am happy to share at any time, and that will hopefully clarify much of what is happening within the office. But as you know, we are working to proactively advance equity and eliminate inequities both within and outside of the municipality. And in terms of, things that are forthcoming, it has been very helpful to be able to meet with those on the assembly who have shared to me their vision, and it has assisted in my being able to craft a 6 to 12 month plan, which I am happy to share.
Thank you. I think that would give me a really great sense of how to also talk about the office with the public. I'm looking forward to your vision for it and the work. I'm also wanting to make sure that we are fully committed with our dollars to making sure this work happens. So a work plan will be a great way to start to put some timing and some strategy and action behind the office. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Zolotel. I also want to add, I understand that this office sits in a unique position directly between the Assembly and the Mayor. And I am very grateful for those of you on the Assembly, again, that have taken the time to help me better understand the capabilities of this office. It is my priority to uplift the capabilities and abilities of this office. And so I look forward to that ongoing dialogue. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Bronca.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, when we looked at the difference between, oh my gosh, the echo is crazy, sorry. The internal audit, they had a 1.1% increase, and this is higher. And is that in reflection to the director larger pay coming in, or it seems like all departments should have a similar increase, as negotiated with unions? So just curious about that.
Through the chair to Member Bronga, the salaries and benefits adjustments within the Equity and Justice Department include increases that were rolled over as part of the previous administration's salary changes and as part of an increase for incoming staff. There are 3 people posted in the revised budget as part of the department. For the proposed budget, there would be 2 people within the budget, and the budget is $363,000 total. So some of those changes are incorporating the prior administration's changes that rolled into this year and small increases from the incoming administration.
Thanks for that explanation.
All right, anyone else on this budget? Yeah, you'll notice, Ms. Bronca, that there were a number of very generous salary increases given at the very end of the last administration. It's kind of a cash out process. Maximize the money on the way out the door. So that's at least my
That's
take.
why we need those audits.
Yep, that's my take on what happened there. So anyone else? All right, hearing and seeing none. We'll go on to the next section. How's that gonna roll?
I think we should move on to the fleet levies presentation. Mr. Falsey can take the conversation around the general government and APD fleet, and we can change the slide decks.
Can we also, just reach out to everybody who you have scheduled and just get them here because it feels like we could be done.
They were scheduled to be here coming at 12:30, and so they should be here shortly, starting yes, yeah. Except for ACDA, which will be after 2 because of scheduling. So if that needs to change, we
I
can
would
go
suggest,
upstairs. I think he's upstairs, so.
let them know that it's gonna probably be before.
Okay, do we want to take a short break in order to go find all of those people to facilitate them, or do you want to just roll into?
Wondering if somebody could send an email or a communication.
They
and
have
we
been,
can keep
yes,
going.
yes.
Thank you. Good, let's go ahead and move into the fleet levies conversation.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Cruise ship?
Oh, yeah.
We're getting a cruise ship?
No,
Hopefully it tugs. Hopefully it tugs.
Are we ready to roll?
Bring it on.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're going to introduce the tax levies portion of the budget proposal. And to review the bidding briefly, when we first came to you, we picked up the outgoing Bronson administration's transition report. And I think everyone has now come to believe that the best line in the entire report goes to Shea Troop, who said, "We are threatening the imminent collapse of the ability of the municipality to provide basic services due to the state of the fleet." And just to set the stage, we created the problem for you then. We showed you how old our various snow response equipment is and how, according to best practices, most of those engines should have a certain amount of time on them, but we're actually way over that for most of our engines. And then likewise, we pivoted to the police department and we showed you their strategic plan, which pointed out that a huge portion of the police department's fleet is also aged beyond what is recommended, leading to Shea's conclusion of imminent collapse. Recall, these are frontline services that we're delivering and also folks' offices, basically, in the police department. So having brought to you a problem in July, now we're bringing to you a proposed solution. And to find that solution, we look to recent history, to April 2020, when we asked Anchorage voters not to issue bonds for body cameras or other computer-aided dispatch and records management systems, APD information technology, but to do a special levy. And the voters said yes to that. And then likewise, the following year, we went to voters again and said, may we have a special levy to lease area-wide emergency medical equipment? And again, the voters said yes. Those two provided us a roadmap for how we wanted to tackle this problem. They were born of a slightly different initial consideration, which was that in this setting, both of the things that we went to the voters with were things that traditionally we would have bonded for and would have bought outright, but we're instead needing to lease because the vendors had changed their service models where they don't actually sell this equipment to us anymore. And so we switched to this special levy model. But here, we're going to take it a step further and propose to do it for the fleet. And I'll explain the mechanics of that and then some of the thinking. There are two levies that are included in the budget process. The first one here is labeled the General Government Fleet Vehicle. It really is the ARDSA Snow Response and ARDSA Equipment Levy. And I will walk you just through the mechanics of it if you haven't had a chance to sit down with it. Right now, we have in the heavy fleet about 100 pieces of equipment. They're all different kinds of things: dump trucks, sanders, loaders, graders, blowers, trackless machines. And they all cost different amounts of money. But on average, a rough rule of average right now is that the average cost for any one of those machines is about $450,000. If you wanted to turn over the whole fleet every 10 years, you could just take you would try to replace 10 pieces of equipment every year. You got 100 pieces of equipment. If you're buying 10 every year, then by the 10th year, you've completely turned the fleet over. What we've proposed here is a $3.5 million annual levy. That doesn't quite get us to that 10-year life cycle replacement. It would let us have about 7 vehicles and get us to an average vehicle service life of 15. I'll give you some commentary on that in a second, but I'll say here's the second half of the story. The police department also has a levy. Reminder, these have to be different levies because they come from different service areas. So the police department has the police service area. ARDSA has our frontline snow equipment. Similar story. The APD fleet has about 500 police cars in it now. On average, those are about $75,000 a piece. If we've proposed a $3 million annual levy, which would let you buy 40 vehicles a year. So we get an average service life of 12 and a half. One question might be, why not go for 10 if 10 is sort of the industry spec? And I guess part of the answer is we never have nice new things in the municipalities. Maybe it's just born of being kind of beaten down. We always stretch things a little bit further than they need to be. Another answer is that we're trying not to break the bank, right? We're trying to live within our means. I think a third reason is that there are some public policy reasons to not overly trap a lot of money in dedicated funds, because if we had a super healthy dedicated fleet fund and had other needs, you wouldn't be able to tap those for those other needs. So why do a dedicated fund at all if there are some public policy reasons to think about not dedicating funds? Here, I think there really is a public policy reason to do it this way. And first, if we take as a given that we are going to need to be in the snow removal and police services business forever, then we are for sure going to have to be buying these vehicles for forever. And so we're proposing a solution that is not a bond, because a bond is a one-time fix. It lets you buy the thing one time and then pay it off and you're done. You'd have to keep going back to voters for bonds forever. If we know that we're going to be in this business for forever, then it is ultimately going to be cheaper not to borrow the money and pay debt service on it, but rather just to collect it and put it into a real plan. It also attends to the fact on the dedicated fund side that there is a little bit of a political timeline mismatch here. There are going to be years, especially on the ARDSA side, where there'll be heavy fleet buy years and light fleet buy years. And if general government is poor, it is possible for an administration on a 3 or a 6 year time horizon to short the fleet fund, because it creates a problem 10, 15, 20 years down the road that you will not be here for. And that might be a little bit of the situation that we are in now, that there were always more pressing, and not because anyone was being nefarious, but there are always more pressing emergent needs that need addressing now. And that's a tomorrow problem. But the tomorrow problem is catching up with us now. And we're trying to create an enduring solution that will prevent this version of a tomorrow problem from rearing its head again in 15 or 20 years.
So these aren't dual votes, dual yes votes, right? So we have a limited service area that's not pledging the full faith and credit. And so I imagine it's just the actual payer.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Meg.
Thank you. So my question on the levy is, what's the flexibility? Like, if you all were to find an amazing grant to buy some of this equipment that we need, are we able to, or are you able to put forward a levy that just doesn't exceed an amount in a year where we find other funding? Or can you talk about the mechanics of that?
Yes, through the chair to members, Altel, that's a great question. And yes, so we have to submit to you before the budget is completely over, ordinances that would actually send these questions to the voters. And we can and should style that to where it is a not to exceed amount or an up to an annual amount, so that if we are in a happy circumstance where we just don't need to collect this money because somebody else paid for all of our police cars next year, we wouldn't need to collect the money and just squirrel it away. And I think that is actually how I'm going to get in trouble here. I'm looking at all the OMB folks, but I believe in practice that is actually how the body cams ordinance has worked, that we have not used the full taxing capacity of that, but I'm getting mixed signals on that. We could research that.
That's correct. So, okay, I just want to make sure it worked the same way. Thanks.
Thank you. So I have some thoughts on that. I agree it should be an up to amount, not a flat, we will do this amount every year based on need. But I also recognize after the last several years that that's just one more way for a bad faith operator to not spend. But that's okay. I think it's still in the best interest of the community. And generally speaking, we've had people of good faith in all of these departments for a long time. And so it mitigates any of those concerns. Really don't want to set policy based on your worst experience, but on your average experience. And so, okay, any further questions on the levies? The room is starting to pack up. So probably we'll be shifting gears here just a sec. I don't know, whose turn is it next? Mr. Corsentino, your name has been spoken. Sounds good. Okay. So Meg just asked if there's time for a kind of a general enterprise and utilities philosophy question. So since you're about ready, now might be the time for a good philosophical question before we dive in. Meg, go ahead.
Thank you. So my question is, I'd just like to know kind of the approach taken with the enterprise and utilities budgets, particularly that intersection between self-sustaining, meeting their strategic goals and plans, and the dividend to the municipality. I know most of our enterprise and utilities are working to diversify and leverage funding, and that some of their money or their unrestricted cash really can be used to match federal opportunities should those come to pass. So I just kind of wanted to get a philosophical overview before we go into the specifics.
Thank you, Member Zalatel. Through the chair to Member Zalatel, I will answer that by saying the budget guidance that was given to the enterprise and utilities this year was different than the budget guidance that was given to the general government departments. The utilities and enterprises were encouraged to let us know what they needed and why they needed it, and to operate within the bounds of prudent and appropriate business functions. And so there are small changes, increases, but you'll also see some dividend allocations from a couple of the entities that are larger than last year's, specifically because of the point that Member Zalatel made, which was the assessment of the sort of capital accrual and the cash on hand associated with the enterprises and utilities, the formulas that exist, or the review process for dividend allocations. So there's slight changes in a couple of them to come current with 2024 and 2025 fund numbers. Does that answer the question?
It does. I guess as we have each present, if it's a shift in their dividend amount, I would just like to hear from the directors about how they're covered for any potential opportunities that may arise.
Through the chair to Member Zalatel, we will have them tell you those things.
Okay, so now to the specifics.
My computer's not live.
because Bill tuned in. Did you get yourself back hooked up?
Yeah, but I can't. Good. We're going to start with Anchorage Hydropower. We've got some revisions based on the 2024 to 2025 budget roll. There were some first quarter budget revisions that were made in the hydro budget that were not incorporated in, no, that was AWU. Was that AWU? Yeah, that's AWU. I'm going to let Mark do this part. Mr. Corsentino, please take over.
Good afternoon, Assembly members. As far as the hydro budget, I think at a higher level, there's a couple of things to understand here. This Department of Utility is still trying to mature and clarify its vision. Right now, it's really addressing the Fish and Wildlife Program and maintaining its ownership rights with respect to the Cont'd hydro project. So to that end, though, a couple of things to understand on this budget. We'll likely have to do a first quarter budget revision for a couple of reasons. The budget that the Cont'd Owners Committee does is going through the process right now. We don't have a budget formalized or finalized yet. We're going through that budgeting process. It's on the schedule of the minority utility owners, Chugach and MEA. So this is a continuation, but there were some changes made. It looks like, they're reversing some furniture stuff. There's some transfers to the general government larger that are being done. I think this administration has a different, and Ona can speak to that when the time is right, whether now or later. There's a different philosophy of the power purchase agreements, particularly with the Chugach's and where those funds should be appropriated. But it also gets to the bigger question that the Assembly and the administration still never resolved. What's the overall vision of Anchorage Hydropower or Anchorage Power or whatever it may be? And what does it need for funding, whether it becomes an independent power provider or what's its long-term goal and vision? And that's not finalized yet. At a bare minimum, I think we'll have a first quarter budget revision strictly because we need to, until we get our final budget from the Cont'd Operators Committee, we don't have firm set numbers yet. We will have increases preliminarily from the Fish and Wildlife Program that the governor just approved. But all that is being worked through right now, and we'll have a first quarter budget revision proposal. The stuff here, there's a bigger dividend being proposed and bigger transfers than have been in the past. And that's kind of just more of a philosophical and approach. To Meg's question earlier, this is a self-sustaining operation. It doesn't have very many expenses at all. Obviously, that could change, but that, again, it gets to goals and philosophies from the administration and the Assembly. So I'll leave it at that.
Meg?
Thanks. I noticed the hydropower CIP has $325,000 for the next 5-6 years, and it's for our participation in the Fish and Wildlife Program. I guess my question is, how do we reconcile putting that in the CIP and making sure that that funding isn't spent on anything that contravenes current policy or code? And is this where we're likely to see that first quarter budget revision, or possibly sooner if that budget is complete?
So you're stepping into there, as you're aware, there's still some open legal action on this topic, to be very blunt about it, with the RCA. So I don't know that we'll have the answer to that question, and that's something legal would have to weigh in on too. I know the PPAs and the PSA itself require us to, fund this stuff, but at the end of the day, there's some legal questions to that are being resolved. Ultimately, we've also talked about too, and it's not, it hasn't been fully vetted yet because it's still the governor's proposal just got, sent out this month, a few weeks ago, or the final program. There are certain things that can certainly be done that would have to be done no matter what. A big significant cost in all of this program will be just the bridges over the Cont'd River. I think in any scenario, there's going to be a restoration of water in the Cont'd River. The question is whether it's 11 or 12 miles, and that's to be resolved in other venues. And until we have that, I think there's certainly, I mean, the bridges alone are several $7 million. And then there's some other funding, like such as the Cont'd Lakeside Trail, that's a commitment, so on and so forth. But your other questions a little deeper than we can probably resolve in this venue. But I would think at least in the first quarter budget revision, those questions could come up again, and hopefully we resolve them during that development.
I just want to summarize to make sure I understand. You're saying that regardless of what we do to implement the Fish and Wildlife Program, that what needs to be done up front, at least within that $325,000 that's in the CIP, I think it's $325,000, is it's just getting us started, I guess is how I would put it. And that a lot of it is, regardless of the ultimate policy choice, it's things that actually will just need to happen.
Yeah, correct. There is existing, because this is the capital budget, right? That's what we're looking at. Yeah. There's also, yes, there will be forward funding and all the capital stuff and preliminary work. In addition to that, there's other capital work that's going on, such as control upgrades to the turbines there and such not that are newer, because it's an aging infrastructure issue. So but we haven't put that forward to you yet, because I just got that. Honestly, I just got that at the EOC meeting yesterday, the preliminary budget. So it's too early to give you all that. But to answer a specific question, we need funding to at least forward fund some of the commitments that I think are non-controversial.
Okay, I appreciate that. And as we have hydropower capital expenses just for the operation of the utility, getting the clarity on that and that detail will be really helpful. Thanks.
So I just want to understand, Mark, what you had said, that we don't yet have a statement of expenses or a budget from the hydropower other parties, Chugach Electric and MEA, and that will in fact set the budget when we get those.
I have a preliminary budget that I got at a meeting yesterday. And usually the way they do that is they vote on that in the November meeting, which is a month away. And then, what was the second half of your question?
Do we have a vote?
I think affirmatively we surrendered our vote, so no, but we have a say. Let's put it that way.
So ultimately, I just want everyone to understand, and this record to understand, Chugach and MEA set our budget. Chugach and MEA are a third-party pair of entities whose actions effectively change this document that we're set to approve. So there is this really wild and interesting argument out there that we, as a body, are exerting some undue influence to a utility that is a subsidiary of our organization. But in fact, it's the other way around. The operators of Chugach Electric and Matanuska Electric Association, by the RCA's fiat, are able to now set line items in our budget. That is the takeaway that I have. This is not us putting forward a budget. This is not us even approving a budget at this time. This is us being handed a piece of paper and being told third parties have a right to levy expenses on this municipality. It's a very interesting dynamic. It can't stand. It has to be repaired. Just can't stand. It's against all principle. The governor needs to hear this. Anyhow. Okay. Anyone else on this item? So Anchorage Hydropower, subject to change at the will of the direction of Chugach and MEA. Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to AWU. Still with Mr. Corsentino. This is the best one when we get to just keep the same person here.
Come on up, Casey. So I've got my assistant CFO for AWU here, Casey West. So she has a lot more information, any detailed questions that may come up. But at a high level, again, two utilities, Anchorage Water Utility and then Anchorage Sewer Utility. Both are enterprise agencies, and they are also regulated by the RCA. So the changes here, a couple of things. If I go through the first sheet as I look through that online on that everyone can see. The first item, I think it was 52,000. I don't know much about that other than I think those were put in a first quarter budget revision that were just never panned out. So that's just, these are continued changes from the prior year's budget. Transfers to other departments, dividend, and so they did.
I'll let you take this one.
I'll have to fill in on it too, but yes.
Yeah, this was what I was saying earlier about the first quarter budget revisions that were part of the budget, but were not actually ever enacted because they did not come from the general government budget, which feeds portions of this. That is some of this reversal. There was a cleanup on the general government side, but not on the utility budget side. So that is the retention bonus for non-rep employees. It's also the dollar amount associated with the dividend decrease that you see there. So that shows a dividend decrease of $3.1 million. But really, the way the dollars will flow out of AWU, this represents a dividend that did not occur in 2024. The first quarter budget revisions included an AWU dividend increase of, was it 3.6? What was the 1Q change?
The 1Q change is a
take it?
4.5. I think with a total of 4.5. 4.1 million.
4.1 million on top of. So this is the decrement of the delta between the 2024 budget and the dividend increase in 2025. I'm going to have to make a flow chart. The annual dividend from AWU is generally $1.5 million. And the 2025 dividend is being proposed at $2.5 million.
Yeah, and that's an important feature there. The administration asked for some help. We said it's a one-time increase of that size because it's not sustainable. And that also does what that means that to keep, remember, we're regulated financially. We also have independent audits and we have bonding agencies that give us a bonding rating, just like the municipality has. So it's important that we have financial metrics that we hold in place. And we're going to take a little bit, the MOE has requested a larger dividend this year, which is reasonable so long as in future years we may have to scale it back slightly. And so the 8-year forecast shows that, and it makes sense, and there's reasons for it. I want to speak to those more than us, but the hard truth is we can sustain that if it's a one-time hit. It goes up. Typically, we have about a 10% of our prior year's net income dividend, which is, if our net income is $15 million, the $1.5 million is 10% of that. That's kind of what we like to keep as our cap to keep it sustainable. Because as you can see, we also pay a lot on MUSA and IGCs, which those are the changes that you're seeing there. Their increases or decreases in some respects, but the dividend's separate. But in future years, we're going down below that 10% potentially. We don't know our net income, but the hard truth is we're just forecasting that because we want a bigger take this year, and that can be done. What's unsustainable is if we ask for $2.5 or $4 million every year, then we'd be in trouble. And that's what we're not doing, so that's reasonable. Debt service is just what it is. We have outstanding loans and bonds that we have to pay interest and stuff like that. So those are just the changes. Those are just calculations based on the fluidity of our accounting and the way those assets are depreciated and with the debt with them. Changes in existing programs. So we did increase some both salaries and benefit adjustments, professional service adjustments, and it looks like supplies too. Although supplies, I call that equipment and supplies. Just we've seen increasing costs. The thing about this budget more than anything in my mind, I don't see
This is the position breakdown in the next page.
Yeah, okay, the next page shows.
So this
all
is the
that.
detail from that.
Yeah, we're
roll-up.
So a couple things, and at a high level, please understand, and this is also AHP as well when I look at those budgets too, I think, but at a high level, please understand that just because we put something in our budget doesn't mean we expense it. Particularly for AU, our rates are based on actual expenses. So when we look at new positions, for instance, we're requesting authorization to add new positions because we've needed them. It doesn't mean we will, because we need to go through our own internal process of saying, is this the best use of our resources and funds? But in order to even do that exercise, we need to know we have authorization to add new positions. And these are important. One thing to bear in mind, especially with AU, is we are a very lean and efficient organization. If I look at Chigetch and MBA, their rates are 25+% above the national average. Anchorage Water and Sewers rates are below the national average, and that's on top of the 20% higher cost of living and the large amount we pay for MUSA and property taxes, which they don't pay, for instance. And natural gas is the same way. So we're a lean, efficient organization. We have room for growth and we need it because we're stretched thin. So this is a request to say, hey, we need some help. We need new positions where there's a lot more regulatory environmental challenges we're running in front of, from EPA, DEC, water rights issues. The list goes on and on. There's a lot going on and we need help. So we're a critical, essential organization and providing water and sewer service to the community. And we take that seriously, but we need some help and we're stretched thin. So we're asking for new positions. We'll go through those closely to verify we will utilize all of them in the right places, but this is areas we've identified as need help. And we've got a lot going on. I mean, we're $1 billion enterprise entity from an owner perspective. You know, our assets are $1 billion stretched from Cont'd down to Girdwood. And the replacement value of those assets is on the order of $10, $15 billion. So we've got a lot of infrastructure in the ground and it's expensive. And it takes a lot to manage that. Chemicals have gone up, depreciation expenses have gone up, insurance requirements have gone up, travel, our utilities. There's, again, I go back to Chugach, NSTAR, and CEA. We pay utilities to all of them, and those have gone up a lot. We haven't accounted for that in prior years. We just made do with what we've got. So that's that.
We can go to capital.
So capital, okay, we're still in the water utility.
Still on the water utility.
Yeah, so I'm going to look at the total line. These are just projects. If you have questions about, let me know. But loop conversion,
It's 2 pages.
Yeah. So the total we're asking. So historically, we've been on around $20 million per utility. I can tell you. I mean, and the assembly's seen this too in the last few construction invitation of bids. I mean, prices have almost gone up 100% in some of our construction bids. Where we've bid it, we assume 3 and it ends up being 6, you know, and so we've seen some significant increases in construction costs. There's not a lot of competition right now. We've had bids where we've had one contractor for a $9 million project, right? And we estimated it at 5 and it comes in at 9. So we've seen some huge increases. So we've had to account for that. So our capital program is increasing and there's a lot of outstanding stuff that we need to get done. You know, just on this page right here, some of the bigger ones that I can see, it was more so on the bigger pages. This is just R&R, a rehabilitation of our assets and infrastructure. Again, when you have over $15 billion in replacement value in our assets, you've got to continue to invest in them, and that's what this is. If there's any specific questions, they vary quite a bit. You know, Cont'd's got a lot of stuff. We got the water rights still going on there. The transmission mainline valve vault. I mean, just getting water from a Cont'd to town is really important. The plant itself has got a lot of process improvements and upgrades. It is critical to Anchorage's water supply, and we've got to continue to reinvest in it. Girdwood's got some water stuff going on as well, and with its well and distribution system, and you know we've got to maintain everything. So I'll leave it at that. If there's specific questions, let me know.
Meg?
Thanks. So I've no doubt you guys have it handled, but what concerns me is the reverse on the dividend. We did not improve the larger dividend at 1Q last year. We rejected it.
Through the chair to members, Alatel, that's right. But the action did not include going back and revising the utility budget to match the general government change during the amendment process. So it's a technical error, but it has to be reflected because it was not moved back out during the first quarter budget process on the utility side, if that makes sense.
But no money changed hands?
Correct.
Okay, good. Phew. Thanks.
Other questions?
I think you could have been different.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the wastewater.
Okay, similarly, this is going to be, you know, water and wastewater oftentimes going to have similar, the view is going to be similar. So our IGCs looks like have gone, those are interdepartment overhead charges. Those have gone down a little bit. MUSA has gone up about $600,000. IGCs have gone up 143. Debt services, those again are more accounting things. As we look at our debt and our loan requirements, we just adjust those on an annual basis. But again, we are same thing on the sewer utility. So when you look at our water and wastewater staff, for instance, we have a combined staff by and large. Most of them are about 50-50. So when you see an increase on one side, you're going to see it the married self on the other side. So this is the other half of that requirement. And contractual services, part of contractual services, I have to say, is also legal services. We've got a heck of a lot of money in legal services because of regulatory changes on water and wastewater both. And so that's a significant thing. There's a lot of newer regulations that are challenging to implement and follow, and water rights being a big one of them as well. So I'll leave it at that. Going back to the positions, a lot of new positions we're advocating for. Again, just like what we said on the water utility, it'll be contingent upon getting approval to allow us to recruit for that, but also even create the positions. And we want to make sure we can do that. We'll go through a due diligence process to make sure it's the right person. But I can tell you, we are a lean, efficient organization. We need the help and resources if we want to survive, and that's really important. And we are, like I said, I think one of the highlights for us is that we are very affordable to our peers, and that's a good thing. Again, debt expenses and depreciation, those again were accounting type changes in our budget that are just calculated. A lot of times what we'll say is those are non-manageable expenses. They're things that are just calculated. When we have outstanding debt, we just have to, every year, those numbers change. But go to questions on the operational, because we can go to capital if not. Can the capital side of the house, again, R&R, we have, 700-800 miles of sewer mains, lift stations throughout, plus wastewater plants throughout our system, and they all need tender loving care, is really what it gets down to. One thing of note to you, though, for a compliance issue, one thing that we have enough other stuff going on, that one of the things that's fallen out of the limelight, if you will, is the fact that Anchorage's wastewater treatment plant is going through a permit process right now, and it's really important as we look at our wastewater plant. That's $1.5 billion liability if we aren't successful in that program. So one of the things that's really important we do is make sure we're in clean and compliance. One of the challenges on our compliance has always been sanitary sewer overflows caused by fats, oils, and greases. So it's one of those things that's kind of you wouldn't think of it in that manner, but fats, oils, and greases, which is the stuff we get in the grease traps from restaurants that may not get caught in the grease traps and gets through the system. We have to make sure those entities that do collect fog from the grease traps in the restaurants have a place to put it. And ironically, it's been one of those weird things that no one else has really taken that on. I think who was it? Not solid waste, but Alaska Waste for a while. They take yellow grease. In yellow grease, they use it. They made biodiesel out of it, and they had a program of collecting it. But there's a lot of brown grease too, and that's the stuff that's the Achilles heel, and that has not had a good place for disposal. We've had to take it to the landfill at times, mixing it with solids. So we want a receiving station so we can have a better use for that and recycle it in other manners. And no one else will do that in the private industry. So we have to do that because it is causing us compliance issues. So that's what that's for. And we're going to be doing that as well. But Eagle River's got its own wastewater plant. That's got some upgrades. And I think even Girdwood does. Maybe if it doesn't this year, Girdwood's also going through a permit process. And as a matter of fact, so is Eagle River. All three of our wastewater plants are actively going through re-permitting process right now too. So there's a lot of work on all those efforts. We have FAC plants for all those facilities that we do upgrades with, which is what you're seeing here and some of the stuff. And is this just one page? Okay, so Girdwood wastewater plant also has some upgrades as well. Let's see, rolling stock, 2 million. Okay, so the King Street grease pit is going to combine with the fog receiving station. One of the things that we learned through the grease, kind of said earlier, this kind of caught us off guard. It didn't catch us off guard. It's an ongoing issue for all sewer utilities around the United States, but originally this King Street grease pit, that's a temporary solution. We were going to do upgrades there until we could find out the fog receiving station. What will happen is King Street grease pit will probably get married together with the fog receiving station because it's a big project. And we were going to do a temporary solution, and it's going to become more permanent. The grease pit, we have a grit pit there we're calling it a grease pit in this case, but it's actually a grit pit. We're going to try to convert to a grease pit. We're not going to do that. The grit pit alone, when we go out and clean our sewers, which we have to do to prevent SSOs, not just from fats, oils, and greases, but just from solids and other stuff like that. We have a grit pit that collects that stuff, dries it out for disposal. That system alone needs some improvements. We're going to try to consolidate with grease. We're not going to do that. We're separating the two. But the hard truth is they both need improvements because they both collect nasty stuff that has systems in there that need to get maintained. And so that's what that is. Pump Station 2 and 12 are our largest pump stations in Anchorage that collect the most amount of waste that's sent out to the wastewater treatment plant. They're both, several million gallons a day. I'm going to say 10 to 12. So they're big facilities, and they're both, kind of on the ocean. Pump Station 2 is Chester Creek, what you see by the trail by Chester Creek Lagoon, and then Pump Station 12 is down there by the outlet of Campbell Lake. Both those have significant upgrades. They are the major two lift stations, and they've been ongoing for years. Costs have increased on those, and they're just long overdue, so we're working on those as well. Other than that, safety improvements, we spend a lot on safety. We want to continue to spend more because it's critical. We've all seen what the MOA safety programs run into. We're a part of that, but we have our own safety group as well. And it's stuff costs more. That's really what it gets down to. So I'll leave it at that. If there's questions, let me know.
Zach.
Yeah, thank you. You kind of touched on how essential that EPA waiver is for the operation of our wastewater treatment plant. And in here, you included upgrades to the fat oil and grease equipment to try and make sure that we meet those standards so we can continue to have that waiver.
Yep.
Is there anything else, that perhaps is not in here that we should be mindful of that we need to consider investing in? Just again, because if God forbid we lose that waiver, we are in a very, very hard position. So are we putting off anything we should not be putting off?
What's not on, yeah, well, so there's a broader, yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. And this gets, I don't know when solid waste is up, but there's two things with respect to solid waste we're working on that is really critical. Landfill leachate is one of the more challenging waste streams that we collect. And so we did get congressional designated spending funding from Murkowski to further investigate getting rid of landfill leachate through depot injection or other. That probably is one of the Achilles heels to our permit renewal process, because landfill leachate, it's not passed through, it's pre-treated, but it's perceived as passing through. And the reality is there's some nasty stuff in landfill leachate, from metals to really high nitrogen compounds, ammonia and stuff like that. So that thing is a challenge. And it's not just a landfill leachate, it's also Merrill Field leachate too. They also are both really high in PFAS compounds. And that's a looming crisis that we're going to run into with the regulatory environment, is when those PFAS regulations are final on wastewater. The largest contributions of PFAS we get are both from the landfill leachates and then the J-Bear. And so we've got to tighten that area up. So those are some looming issues we're running into. On our operational budget, one of the things we have plug more money in for is more sampling, because the PFAS sampling is extremely expensive, and the regulations are looming and forthcoming. So the other one then that we're working with the landfill on, which is really important, I think, actually for an energy opportunity for the whole MOA at large, is mass burn, waste to energy mass burn. And what that does, we have solids, biosolids, if you will. And those biosolids we dry, but we take them to an incinerator at our place right now, but it doesn't recover any energy, and it's really old. It'd be better to consolidate that with the landfill and have them. There's an opportunity for us to recycle, use carbon. They call it green carbon trash, to recover energy, firm power, 20 to 30 megawatts, which would be very useful, and it would help us solve our biosolids issue too, because we got to invest in the downs. When we remove solids from our wastewater plant, which we do a really good job of, there's residual solids you got to deal with. And right now we incinerate them and then take the ash to the landfill. And there's a better, more efficient, probably beneficial use for doing that, but it involves solid waste too. So I don't know if we have money in that yet, but we need to work. We're going to continue to work with solid waste to figure that out. But that's been a long-standing issue that was even prior to this administration and the prior administration. We looked at it, just didn't take off. I think now more than any time, with the energy crisis we have with natural gas prices, that may become far more economical and beneficial. And on top of the fact that, ironically, when you look at incineration, that the type that they would propose to do at mass burn, it can actually destroy PFAS compounds too, which is a huge win as well.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe won't belabor it here, but maybe it's something we bring up at a conversation and committee meeting. I know Mr. Persinger gave us an update on the waiver not too long ago, but it seems like something that we just want to be very careful not to get blindsided about. So I'll leave it there because we got a lot to cover. Thanks.
Anyone else? So I have a question. What about the third W?
I'm sorry, did I miss something, Chris? The what?
Well, it's actually the S, the stormwater utility.
Oh,
So I don't see a page for that. It's like the third utility under the water, wastewater, and stormwater utility. So it wouldn't be right to not at least mention it in this work session.
well, a couple things on that. I mean, that's a policy decision the Assembly and the administration need to catch up on. Is what I'll pass the baton on that. But what I can say is that we'd have to, well, a couple things. We have a lot going on now. I think we want to have a very thoughtful conversation on that, on resource availability. It doesn't mean it shouldn't get done, and it's a good thing to do. It means that we've got to balance that with everything else going on. And then, of course, it does require funding, some seed funding. Remember, particularly AWU being economically regulated, we can't even do expansion without outside funding, right? So
I recall we appropriated $1.5 million through a loan that we're paying off, and I don't think we've ever had a briefing on that final report. And there's no way to reboot the conversation if you don't put a line on it somewhere. We created the account exists. And so obviously the last mayor executed the administrative authority to say, no, thank you. I am here to say we haven't forgotten, and it is a priority, and the account exists, and we should do something. If we don't start now, then in 3 years, who knows, or 6 years, who knows?
Understand.
So, okay, thank you. That's it, I think. Anything else? See any other questions? Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Corsicino. We'll pivot back to the operating budget to Equal Rights Commission next. Wait. Well, yeah, why don't we do the next one that's here then? Yeah, whatever report we can do. We do spend a lot of time with the port, so this one I am anticipating won't be too long either. Mark, did you leave your bag over here? Okay. Welcome, I'm the Port of Alaska.
Okay, through the chair to membership. This is the Don Young Port of Alaska operating budget. The 2024 revised budget started at $16.2 million. Small changes in charges to other departments and the Musa assessment. Some changes in salaries and benefits adjustments that were part of 2024 rolling into 2025. And the proposed budget changes are security and alarm services and accounting services increases. And the rest, Mr. Rebuffo can speak to.
Go ahead.
Well, the rest of the budget is pretty consistent with what we have done. Is it on?
Green.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, the rest of our budget is pretty consistent with what we do pretty much every year. We have a kind of an in-house habit of looking at about 5 years worth of expenses and averaging those and seeing if that makes sense to continue to put into the budget for the next fiscal year. And so far, that's been working pretty well for us. But these are the big changes this year on the operations side. What you don't see is a call out for the Ship Creek small boat launch. I'm still collecting all the data from what it was we expensed against it this year. And I think by the time we hit first quarter budget adjustments, we will go ahead and come up with an operating line item for Ship Creek small boat launch and suggest that to you. The other expense here that you may see a change on in first quarter budget adjustments is the security and alarm services line item. $285,000 is what we estimated was going to be the increase in the security contract for the port. Because we are reletting that contract. It goes into effect on the 1st of November. It's been a while since that contract has been renewed, so we're anticipating there'll be some cost increases for salaries and the like. So that's our best guess. If it's a guess that's too high, we'll adjust that also at the end of first quarter. And subject to your questions.
Meg.
Thank you. I know that the port modernization program is separate and distinct, but I think we always have to be looking at everything holistically. So based on your 25 budget, what impact do you believe this may have to your base tariff?
Well, the base tariff, recall when it was last approved, was approved with 10 years of rate structure in it. So we're in year 7 of the 10-year structure. And so far, those annual rate increases based on a percentage every year that we've put into effect has been sufficient to cover the operating costs and the capital costs of the port that already exists. So I'm very comfortable that we're in good shape tariff-wise going forward. And you'll probably see something come to you in the next year or so that is a renewal of the tariff. And we like this 10-year map out of rates pretty good. And I think the users like it as well. So we'll repeat that in whatever we do next. But for the time being, we're pretty comfortable that what we have in place is sufficient.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I think it would be good as we approach the end of that tariff timeline to be able to take a look back of budget to actuals year over year to see how close we got on tariff collected expenditures by year. Because I don't have a good sense of, I mean, I take your word for it, but I haven't seen the numbers to tell us how we've done.
And fair enough, and we're happy to do that. And here's what I'd suggest, how I suggest we handle this, because when you last passed the tariff, it came with instructions to report back annually in around the September timeframe on how well it is doing to meet those expenses. And we've been telling you in words what that means, but we should probably put some tabular information in there to give you a pretty clear picture of what was anticipated and what was actual. If you don't mind, we handle it that way, since we owe you an annual report already, that we take care of it that way.
Perfect.
All right, anyone else on the port? I would be remiss if I didn't inquire the $1 million for the security fence. Do you think that's going to be sufficient?
I'm kind of hoping that's going to be more than sufficient.
Yep,
Now,
that's my assessment. I texted off to some other folks who are maybe more skeptical. They're like, that
Yeah.
sounds pretty cheap, but I think it seems sufficient.
Well, and the reason why we started with $1 million was this was before we started to talk about adjusting the polygon that is that area there. So there may be parts of the fence now that are not visible.
Right.
But my concern was, if the whole thing is visible, I knew the community wasn't interested in a 10-foot barbed wire along the top kind of fence. So if you're going to get fancy with the security fence, it's going to cost a little bit more.
That's not the plan, but my theory is the most expense will be the gate, whatever the gate structure is going to be for access. To me,
It always is.
That's where the cost is going to be. The fence is marginal, off the bluff, better than above the bluff, but we'll get to that. Thank you. So Mark?
Thank you. I just looking through this and I see Storm Drain Enhancements annual program, $2.5 million. Do you see an end to this? Because $2.5 million, you don't have a lot of storm drain systems down
Oh, we
there.
have a lot of storm drain systems down there. We are up to 9. So this is going to be a continued expense for at least the next 5 years.
Next 5 years, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Now,
you.
we may not always spend that much. And in fact, we were fortunate enough to get a Defense Community Infrastructure grant from DOD to do a $12 million grant to help offset the cost of some of the storm drain work, because J-Bear drains through the port. And so they
Aware of that.
provide a lot of what wears the system out. And that was recognized. So we're going to attack a couple of the big ones in earnest this next year. We have Michael Baker International's on contract, and they're doing the design work for what has to happen now.
Thank you.
So do we do environmental monitoring at the top? If it's all off flow from the base, are we monitoring what comes to us? Because it's surely the liability is on the person who has the last mile or the last foot. And so if we're taking potentially polluted waste and not screening it and then owning the liability for it because we're the one putting it into the inlet, we might want to conduct some form of regular
And that's a good question, and I don't know how to answer you.
We do.
So what do we?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
certainly-
Cheryl knows how to-
I should have
Wouldn't wanna take
taken
that
a
liability.
Yeah,
Thank
let me
you.
I
Okay.
should have taken
Yeah,
a
just
moment to
Andy.
introduce my brains who are sitting right here. This is Cheryl Beckham. She's the Deputy Director for Finance and Administration. And what Cheryl says, I do, and we succeed.
Okay, just want to make sure we are monitoring because
Yes, we are
that
annually,
sounds like a disaster waiting to happen.
and it's reported to DEC. So we have our contractors, Michael Baker's environmental specialist takes care of that for us.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, Mark, good question. Thanks.
Okay.
Next, we'll move back to AERC. Ms. Prowse.
Through the chair to membership, I will start with the Equal Rights Commission operating budget changes. Our 2024 revised budget starting point was $827,000. We have some small changes in salaries and benefits adjustments as we roll forward to 2025 for $45,000. And there are no additional proposed budget changes for 2025, and their staff count remains 6.
Any vacancies then?
I can't hear you.
Current vacancies?
None, but my level 3 investigator just resigned on yesterday because he found a job that pays more. I mean, right before you guys last time, I said I'm having problems retaining people because the level 3s don't have a place to go because there's only one level 4. So I just got a notice yesterday that he's moving on.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Alatella? No? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you.
Sure,
Oh, wait,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry,
Go ahead, Meg.
so I would like to put this idea out there, and it's really more for Office of Management and Budget. What would it cost to do a 360 look at the Anchorage Equal Rights Commission? I believe it's one of those really important things that gets in a routine, and we don't often take a lot of time to do that wholesale evaluation of, are we meeting the code requirements in the best way possible?
Through the chair to members Alatel, I think that that goes back to a conversation that we were having earlier during the work session, which that could be part of the content for internal audit to be working on. It could be part of a third party review. It can also be and will be part of our municipal operations review in determining what each of the departments needs going forward and how we are actually performing the services that we are supposed to and required to perform. So I think that that will be coming in the next year. And how much it will cost, I don't know. We will need some time to figure that out.
I requested an audit, and my understanding is that's going on. If that might be helpful in giving you more information.
Go ahead.
Thanks.
So the budget here is just salary. It seemed like there was a large budget for, I don't know what you call it, promotional equipment. Do you know, is there money in there for things like T-shirts and is there a separate fund? Is it reflected somewhere? How much money goes into that?
I think that the line items from the previous budget would identify whether or not there were particular promotional items, a particular promotional item budget. And I don't know if there is a line item specifically in
No.
AERC's budget.
We were told to put it under other professional services. There's not a specific code for promotional items. And so what I do is when I transfer money, and it wasn't in my regular budget, all the promotional items I bought, it was transferred over because I had so many vacancies. I transferred money from labor to non-labor and then dispersed it under other professional services.
So if you go to your budget book, your big one.
Yeah.
There is a line that was in 2023, contractual other services, 89,840, and then 2024 revised 11,975. That number has continued forward, 11,975 in the other category. So in 2023, there was a supply line item of $54,749 reduced to $1,200 in 2024 and continued at $1,200. And so That's what the real numbers are outside of this. This is just the change. Yeah. So that's what your book says. All right, anything else? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Who's up next? Is it Merrill Field? Welcome.
I would like to take this opportunity to suggest to membership and all of the public that if you have not toured any of these facilities, these utilities and enterprises, that you should try to, because they're pretty cool. And the airport's one of my favorites because they have a lot of funding that is only 10% match. So we get a lot of money from other entities because the airport knows what they're doing. The 2024 revised budget start point was $1.1 million. There were some of the same reversals from first quarter budget revisions and small increase on salaries and benefits adjustments of $63,000. The 2025 proposed budget changes include increases to fuel costs and ground maintenance services, as well as other utilities and professional services or operating requirements, for a total of 1.269 for the 2025 operating budget. And Director Malpas and his lovely assistant, Amy, can help describe the rest of this to us.
Hey, good afternoon. When you look at the budget for Merrill Field, you'll notice that it's pretty much straight across like as was 2024. We're looking forward into 2025, trying to be conservative. I believe it would have been unwise as a new guy onto the field trying to raise rates without a little more information. We're going to be doing a good thorough wash of the lease rates for the properties, the land leases, as well as the tie downs. The staffing has remained roughly the same at 11. We lost one part-time position, and we have one full-time Tech 1 level that's we have out on the streets now, hopeful to get some help on that as well. If there's any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Karen.
So on the flight operations per year, so last year was a bit lower, but it looks like it's going to continue at this 160, well, what would it be? 160 million, thousand?
Yes, 160,000
Okay.
operations.
And so last year, was that just, you were asked, oh, you weren't even here. You were here, but not director, but you were. So what, was that just, you were asked to skinny down that flight operations and the real amount is 160,000 or?
No, ma'am. I'm, like you said, I wasn't here quite last year, but
Member Bronco, which page are you on?
Oh, I was on the MA 17 in the binder. Hopefully I'm on the right utility.
I'll be glad to answer through the chair if I may.
Okay,
Amy Garcia,
thank
Merrill
you.
Field. So looking at page number 17 at the bottom, what she's talking about is flight operations per year. What that is takeoffs and landings that occur at the airport. That's all FAA air traffic control tower tracked information. So what that number is telling you is actually how many people were at the airport using the airport. So it's not a measure that we have control over. It's a measure showing how many people have wheels touching the ground or leaving the ground. And it could be based on many different factors, fuel prices, how the world is at the moment.
Oh, thank you.
if I could add to that, next year, that flight operations will most likely decrease for the fact that we'll be repaving the primary runway next year. And so we're going to be closing that runway down for about 60 days. And so that, just because of the congestion, that'll limit the number of takeoff and landings as well.
I follow. So where will people take off and land when you've got a reduced runway out of Birchwood or other? Do you think is going to be the airport where they're routed to?
The airport has technically three runways. The primary runway that runs alongside Fifth Avenue is runway 725. That's the one that's going to be refurbished. There's one other paved runway, crosswind paved runway. That's runway 1634. The commercial operations will continue on that runway. And then there's a gravel strip that's used for smaller aircraft with bigger tires. And that runway will continue operating as well. But just because we're going from three runways to two, for convenient purposes, a lot of the transient pilots they'll just not come into Anchorage.
Other questions? I have a question for you, Ona. I noticed a couple of these, the MISA payments and MUSA payments are going down. What's happening?
I'll figure out exactly how that's working, but the assessment totals are down. So their payments to us would decrease.
It's based on the same assessment as all other property
Yeah,
valuations. And so if we did
correct.
some kind of a shift that moved from here to there,
And I think, yes, do you?
Very challenging.
so this is a byproduct of the not closing the 2022 books for a bunch of years. So you're paying an estimated payment, and then this is a correction based on actuals. Okay, that makes sense. And that happened as well with one of the utilities I had just noticed. Okay, thank you. I would love for you to validate that for me, but it sounds absolutely true.
Absolutely. We can
Yeah.
clarify that on a page that is specific to all of the utilities and enterprises that pay MUSA and MISA.
Just kind of get a feeling of why, because if anything, because of some of the shifts we've done, those payments should go up because these are like commercial property, PLI, they're not residential, and residential is where we've been seeing some of those benefits accrue.
And I will say that based on the timeline of the completion of the ACFRs, if we're through 22, then we still have to get through 23 and then 24, which would potentially see
Up or
a
down.
right, correct.
who
And so
knows?
that change will be
Yeah.
reflected
No, I
going
get
forward.
that. If it is in fact that, which it's credible that it is, then it's just a moving target that we would normally have a cleaner number on, but we're not there right now. Okay, thank you. Or more accurate, maybe cleaner isn't the right word. Thank you. All right, next.
Next, we are going to do solid waste services because they're the only ones left back there. You're good. And I should have started saying this at the beginning of these utility pages, but for solid waste services, there is disposal and refuse. So there are two separate budgets to work through, and there are operating and capital for both. So we can work through each of those. And we will start with the solid waste disposal budget. And that is a $27.5.8 million 2024 revised appropriation, changes in the IGCs and the MUSA, as the chair just identified, some small debt issuance changes and debt service changes, and salaries and benefits adjustments of about $300,000 with future landfill closure costs going down. And then some 2025 proposed budget adds, including a new technician and some changes to other positions in trying to configure SWS's personnel count and personnel duties to reflect what they have now in front of them as a much larger facility to work with. So I will throw to General Manager Toth and Oren to discuss any of the details that membership may have questions on.
So thank you, members of the Assembly, Kelly Toth, Acting Director, Solid Waste Services. Just want to kind of give you an overview of the flavor of both utilities, the disposal and the collections. You're going to hear and see that there are some changes proposed in the administration and staffing, and at a high level, you'll hear the flavor of we want to get our house in order with our staffing. So we're really focusing on people, maintenance and operations, as well as fleet maintenance. And that's really what you're going to see in this budget. So if you look at our, where do you want to start here? Looking at the changes, you'll see also that, and remember, we went into a brand new facility this last year. And so this will be the year that we're starting to pay on those debts. And so that's a large part of our budget that you'll see there. And then moving on, you'll see to the contractual services, for example, and the operating is also higher just because we had a lot of vacancies. We were at about 21% vacancy rate. And so we did transfer over some of the personnel funding into the engineering and safety positions is what we're planning to do. We've had a vacancy in our safety position now since January, and we are closing on our RFP now. So we'll finally be onboarding a safety manager, subject matter expert that's going to get us up and running again. And then we will go out and recruit for that as well. So looking at also in the disposal budget, you see the adjustments to the staffing that I mentioned. Those are the changes that are happening with that moving forward. So any other questions on with the disposal?
Ms. Alatel.
Oh, capital.
Thank you. And I might have which side is which wrong, but as you start paying on a debt, particularly for Central Transfer Station, are you on track with rates for customers as we've understood them, in effectuating your strategic plan, or should we be expecting to see any rate increases that are above what's been forecast previously?
So through the chair, members, Alatel, thanks for the question. Actually, in looking at the trajectory that was put together with the visionaries that made this plan, it looks like we're going to be in good shape at least through 2028 based on what you see. It looks like we have we're operating a little bit in a deficit if we were to have a full bench with our employees. But we know that just as you heard from AWU, we're in a similar position where we know we're not going to be at full capacity, and we will be, watching our bottom line very closely. But based on the rate structure that you've designed through 2028, you should not be hearing any additional increases from SWS. So,
Great, thank you.
Yep, thank you. And just to look at the capital side, I mentioned you're going to see fleet maintenance, you're going to see maintenance and operations. We are, as you've heard from us before, we're under a compliance order by consent for air quality, which requires SWS to upgrade our designing and constructing our gas collection system. That's going to include upgrading the blowers, the flare, additional flare, and also all of the gas collection system. And then you'll also see the pickup trucks, the light duty, also the transfer trucks, tanker trucks, our perimeter road paving, and then replacing of some of our other equipment. So we need to do some cleaning up of our house and getting ourselves in order. So that's what this budget really is for. And you also do, though, although we're not going to be asking for great increases, you are going to see some Q1 budget revisions that are going to be around some of our plans for, so for example, for Merrill Field, getting at what's happening with the liquid seep and also the gas collection system there. That's definitely going to be something that we're planning on making those plans now. So when we come back to you in the spring, we're going to be asking for those kinds of project funding moving forward. So, and then moving on to our collections, similar, you'll see that the cost of everything has gone up. You see that our debt service, same thing. And then in the personnel, just so you're aware, the administrative costs, which is where most of our staffing changes are happening with bringing in an IT person, for example, and getting our staffing levels where they need to be. You'll also see that both disposal and collections pay into that administrative fee. So they share that expense 60/40. So that's part of where you'll see the increase on the collection side. And then if you look at the capital side, it's similar. We're just doing replacement of our refuse front loaders, side loaders, and the light duty vehicles. And so we're going to be doing some studies to see really where we are with that, go through the fleet and make sure that we are as lean and nimble and efficient as we can be. And I'd be remiss if to say that, you know, we've mentioned this before, but we really are the stewards of the environment. We're the first line defense, and we want to make sure that we're doing it in the most efficient way possible. And the way we look at it is our short-term goals here is to really get our house in order and get things back up and running the way we want to see them running for the best benefit of the city. And then we're also looking into the renewable natural gas option because we're installing this additional flare because we have to. We need to have that redundancy, but we are looking into options to take that landfill gas and actually turn it into a profit, or at least be able to cover some expenses, exploring the compressed natural gas, for example, and running our fleet that way, something that's done all over the United States. Why aren't we doing it here? So there's some things that we're looking into for that. And then long term, we are looking at the options for waste to energy, but we really have some big issues right now with the amount of leachate that we're producing, the amount of gas that we're producing, and we're going to be working through that first. That's really our priority there, solid waste services.
Any questions? Karen?
So you have talked to one of my constituents, but it's a common theme that people feel like they're paying, and this may not be the correct venue, and I can take it offline, but they feel like they're paying more if they're in the solid waste services service area than if they were being able to use Northern Waste or other. And I understand that you allow those waste companies, they contract with you to dump their waste in our landfill. And so I wonder if their fees need to go up so that they're matching what you're charging, or am I just asking a really dumb question here? But
No, I mean, so through the chair, Member Brongo, because we are a government entity, we are not going to lower our rates to compete with the federal or with the commercial companies. They pay a tipping fee, and that's their prerogative. In private business, they can set their rates however they want to. But I think the last thing we want to do is undercut the commercial companies or on purpose do that. And we do have our operating expenses, and we will be reporting to the committee here in the coming months. I believe we'll be working on getting on the agenda so we can really explain the rate study and also show where we are in regards to tipping fees throughout the state. We're actually very low and competitive statewide, and then also even on the West Coast. So we'll be able to have a more robust conversation about where we are with pricing and kind of what that looks like.
so I was thinking more you raise their tipping fees, so they have to compete more fairly with you. But
Yeah, that would, I think, sounds like that's going to be a big conversation for folks. And just, sorry.
Yeah, we received an email recently that had kind of identified how much somebody in South Anchorage in one part of town is paying relative to what their mother is paying, and it's twice or more as much was the argument that they were making. And that's, I think, it's an interesting question. So a briefing on that would be great to kind of understand how it's working in the muni. That would be very helpful. I have a question about bear-proof containers and how we're going to roll out that program that we put into the code. to identify bear sensitive areas. And if we have a plan to achieve any progress on that account. We have a new administration, which ironically has some of the old administration who put forward that code proposal when we first did it in Girdwood. And so really the question is, what's our strategy on that for this year?
Thank you for the question. I'm really glad that you brought it up. We've been working with Fish and Game. They came and did a presentation to the Commercial Haulers Quarterly meeting. It was a really productive meeting, and I'm excited the fact that the commercial haulers, ADF&G and SWS are going to all work together in the spring to be able to do some unified outreach for that, as well as exploring what would it look like for, there's a nonprofit, you probably know more about this, there's a nonprofit for bears and advocacy, and they perhaps may have at least some idea or potential for additional funding and potential partnership with the state for funding to just swap out. And we're going to look at that in a task force. I've talked to the Government Hill President, Community Council. We've been in contact several times over the last few weeks, and a few other residents with the concern of bears in the area and other wildlife. And so our code enforcement officer has been out on leave for a while. She's back, and she's been working that area quite a bit. There's been a lot of conversation about it. Fish and Game has been aware. They know what's happening there, and we did some outreach. And I think that that's another good topic for the committee conversation moving forward. We do want to put a task force together, include some community members from your different areas, and anyone else that's interested. But I think you're going to see a unified movement in the spring for that.
Thank you. Other questions relating to solid waste? Hearing none. I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and have you, Ona, present to us Anchorage Community Development Authority. Because, okay, well,
Go ahead. You want to come sit with me? Yeah, sorry. Mr. Robbins we're going much faster than scheduled. Isn't this how it always goes? The first one's really long, and then the second one goes way too fast. Because we had Mr. Robbins scheduled for 2:30 today, and so he is in other meetings right now. But I think we will be able to cover at a minimum the detail around the budget, and if there are questions, we will answer them. And if Mr. Robbins needs to answer them directly, then we can get that information to you. Okay, Anchorage Community Development Authority operating budget, ACDA, is a different entity than the departments that we have been talking about for the most part. And I am not extremely well versed in their budget. Ms. Guzman is. So she may be able to answer some questions if you have them. Or I believe there are some ACDA board members on the body who also may be familiar with some of this information. But the initial change from 2024 approved to 2025 proposed is a budget change of $6.4 million into $7.8 million. The changes in their parking revenue and other revenue line items gives a total operating revenue change between 2024 approved and 2025 proposed of about $900,000. The operating expenses, you'll see the changes between $8 million to $9.3 million. And if there are specific questions on the delta between those transitions, we can take those.
I have a first question on parking revenue. How much is that related to the garages, and how much of it is citations? Do you know?
Thank you for the question. Member Constant, or Chairman Constant. As far as parking revenue, I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but it would be approximately a 70-30 split with parking revenue being the majority of that over citations.
Parking structure over citations. Okay.
Parking structure and metered spaces over citations.
Okay, gotcha. And how can we see the difference in that revenue? Like, is there a place where we can look?
Our financial statements are broken out by citations and
Could
parking
we get
revenue.
a kind of a communication on that? Thank you. 300,000, and if it's 30%, so it's approximately 100,000 in increased revenue. Back of the hand math, right? And so then 100,000 divided by, say, 20 is approximately 5,000 tickets by 365. That's like 15 a day. Okay, well, that seems pretty reasonable.
If I may, the majority of the increased parking proposed revenue is due to the parking rate increase that happened in last year. However, we did not budget the projection for that last year. So
Okay.
we've taken that into effect this year.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions on the phone?
The capital budget for ACDA includes these projects. I believe some of the conversation around these are that they are funding specific or dependent on other entities that may be participating in these projects as they are being pulled together, designed, and being established to actually be funded. So this is the budget that we would like to see, but it may not be the budget that comes across by the end of the year in terms of partnerships, et cetera, if that's accurate.
What are the sources of $16 million? Thought they only had like $6 million of capacity on any given year. There's 3 times that almost.
Thank you, Chair Constant. That is correct. About 6 million is our general capacity. For most of these items are the heavy lifted items. We intend to apply and have already applied for some grant monies to fund these projects. The projects that we intend to pay out of capital and or finance would be the other property and then the stairwell and garage deck repairs. And with that financing or partnering with developers.
So, Ona, I think we need to see a similar structure of a CIP that identifies funding source year kind of detail, because this is too flat to understand the mechanics of the budget.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there are presentations and report information from ACDA that does a much better job of these budget pages of explaining how those projects are proposed and being perceived. So we can get you that information as well.
Yeah, I think that's fine, but I think for practical purposes, we should try to standardize our method of communication so that, you know, when you finally get skilled in reading the budget, you can understand what's being showed you.
I think that's right. And as we adjust the visuals for the general government budget, we can include any pertinent changes for some of the other utility enterprises and the separation of ACDA. That's doable.
It's hard to tell what the priorities are, and then this just makes it look like these are foregone conclusions, but we're being asked to approve this budget, so we have some say here. Other questions? See anyone else? Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Meg.
That's okay. So this particular budget is hard for me to track. So I'm wondering if we could do a little bit of a look back for budgets to actuals. Kind of, we see the budget each year, but we don't also have a great idea of kind of where you end year over year as compared to your budget.
Through the chair to members Alatal, I believe we can go back through some of the audit information and available ACFR information and work to get you that detail.
Thank you.
I have another question here now. Thanks for pointing us to that, because in the book, it demonstrates $1,556,960 of operating losses. Obviously, you can't see what was budgeted, what was over even in this, because it's not presented in a way for us to be able to understand what's happening. And so, and that's separate from depreciation. And so it's not just off the books numbers. Something is missing. And next year, it looks like it's predicted to be $1.5 million loss, which raises great concern, because in my term, we twice have had to bail out with cash ACDA. And so it's not a tenable situation that we have an enterprise that continues to come back and say, hey, we need $1 million or $2 million here, or buy this building for $5 million more than we spent for it, so we can have some cash to do the things we need to do, which has kind of been the operating mode of the entity for the last few years. So you have some information, Meg, Ona?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is the formatting, as you have said, about the budget document. If you look below from the operating expense to the actual appropriation line item, do I have that on here? Let's see. I do. Okay, so if you look at the operating expense versus the bottom of the page where it says amount to be appropriated, you'll see the difference excluding depreciation. And so that is the actual appropriation dollar amount as opposed to the $9.3 million.
They don't add up. It's not so clean as to just subtract depreciation. Right, I mean, it's
But that's the
1.6,
loss.
it's 1.05, it's 1.5, that one's close in 25, it's within a rounding error, if you will, or margin. But the previous year is definitely not, it's easily over 100, or almost $500,000, more than 500.
I believe if you compare the top line with total operating revenue that says 7.02 in 24 and 7.9 in proposed, with the bottom line amount to be appropriated, that's the operating loss, but it is actually not a loss. No? Right, and that's what I'm saying is that number, yeah.
But again, if you go from your 7 million, then, okay, you factor in your 8 million, which is your depreciation, it's in there, you're still $1 million different net income.
Oh, between 24 to
loss.
25.
No, just in 24, like, you do the math right down the column, you have 7.023, you add the 1.64, you get to the 8.08, and then you are still short 1.056, even having accounted for that. So I guess what that shows is you have about $500,000 of revenue in excess of expenses. And then
Correct.
when you're going, okay, so, okay, I think now I understand. Thank you. It's definitely like everything else is in one language and this is in
It's a
another
puzzle.
language. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, then I think we'll call it good. Thank you.
Okay, so ACDA was the last one on the deck. We can do a quick wrap up and say that we have a few weeks of work ahead of us in order to get to budget passage on November 19th. There will be more work sessions, the Assembly Amendment work session, which I believe may be more conversation and discussion around each of these items. For all the membership, please contact me as you need things or have questions. If that is about creating amendments or creating opportunities, if there are funding sources, et cetera, I'm happy to assist in that conversation. The next, oh, this date is wrong. We should change that. November 15th is not the Assembly work session on amendments. That's November 8th. And so that will be corrected. But please contact me if there's anything that you need, and look forward to more work.
As Meg had suggested before, and as Matthew has shared,
Oh,
Fran has
right.
shared with you your amendment forms. If you are contemplating an amendment, it is time to start circulating them with OMB. They can begin to think about where they might or might not fit within an overall structure. And then if they do or don't fit, then that's part of the amendments discussion on the 8th. And then I think an S version after that will be forthcoming sometime before the meeting of the 19th, hopefully the Friday before, but we'll see. That way, when we get to the final action, everybody has at least the opportunity to move their priorities if they haven't been incorporated. So that's kind of the structure of the workflow that's coming. So we'll have our second public hearing at our next regular meeting. We will have our amendments work session just after that, the Friday after that. And then as the final act week until the final meeting in which we'll deal with the final votes. And ideally we get it done by then, quickly to be followed by the legislative program that is effectively bound to the budget priorities. So that's kind of the workflow. Any last questions? You can reclaim your time. We are adjourned.